it's a privilege to introduce a very good friend of UNEP's, Ms. Sheila Watson, who is the Director of Environment and Research at the Global Fuel Economy Initiative. Ms. Watson, you'll make the final presentation today, and then we have a little video presentation afterwards. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's an honour, a genuine honour, to be called a good friend of UNEP, and it's very, very much reciprocated. And I'm delighted to be here today celebrating World Environment Day by discussing key issues in sustainable energy for small island developing states. And we've heard a lot already about the particular set of social, economic and environmental vulnerabilities, which I think highlight the urgency of a shift towards a more sustainable consumption and production pattern within those states and on those islands. And I think one of those vulnerabilities, and one which I'm particularly focused on and interested in, is in energy use for transport. I'd like to speak today about a small part of that, which is in relation to cars. Actually, not a small part, quite a major part, but a part of that transport challenge. There are currently around 1 billion vehicles on the world's roads, and that figure is set to grow, 2.5, maybe even 3 billion by 2050. And the vast bulk of those new vehicles will be driven and owned and driven in emerging economies. And a part of that growth and that pace of growth is likely to be seen in the small island developing states. And indeed, also the International Energy Agency predict that those vehicles, and a substantial proportion of them, will still be using oil-based fuels by 2050. And that impact of such a massive increase in oil-dependent vehicle numbers and the resultant increased energy demand is indeed wholly unsustainable. It's unsustainable in terms of congestion, pollution and health. It's unsustainable in terms of the costs to individuals and countries as resources become increasingly scarce. It's unsustainable in terms of CO2 and the climate. And of course, it's unsustainable in terms of energy supply and therefore energy security, which, as we've heard already, for the SIDS is heavily energy import dependent nations, is clearly a major issue. So whilst we all know that greater mobility can bring real benefits, it's these potential disbenefits which have motivated 6 key organisations, including UNEP, the International Energy Agency and my own FIA Foundation, to set up the Global Fuel Economy Initiative, which has been working for some time now to improve global average fuel consumption of cars and light vans, on the basis that if we use less fuel, that will contribute to alleviating these issues and problems. The world already has cost-effective fuel economy technologies, things like lightweighting and smaller and more efficient engines, which we need to improve fuel economy. And if those technologies were put into every new car, we could double fuel economy in all of those new cars by 2030. And by 2050, that would mean an improvement on average of 4 litres of fuel for every 100 kilometres driven. And this is existing technology, existing cost-effective technology. It's not about innovation, it's about using what we already have. And that could save $2 trillion net in unused fuel by 2030 alone, and a gigaton of CO2 per year from 2030 and 2 gigatons from 2050. And for a small island state, for example, such as Mauritius, where vehicle numbers have almost doubled 2002 to 2012, that would be a saving of 1 billion litres of fuel by 2050 compared to what would otherwise be used. It would also mean 2,500 fewer kilotons of CO2 would be generated by cars in that nation. And these sorts of benefits can really help to address the sustainable consumption and production objectives of the SIDS. As was stated many times in yesterday's panel on energy efficiency, improved efficiency is integral to sustainable development. Wasting resources is environmentally and economically inefficient, and it impacts on competitiveness negatively. So improved efficiency can actually offer job opportunities, for example, by freeing up resources for investment in new technologies. Indeed, a piece of research which the GFEI sponsored recently suggested that $2 trillion, the figure I referred to earlier, could actually fund the transition to plug-in electric vehicles 4 times over. So we believe that improving fuel economy is an urgent priority for SIDS, in fact, for the whole of the world. But it's a real question as to how we achieve the improvements to which I've referred. Our research shows that where fuel economy policies, consumer information, price signalling, standards, vehicle import regulation, where those policies are in place, and in the main that's in the OECD, the efficiency of vehicles is improving at an unprecedented rate of almost 3% per year. However, in markets outside of the OECD, where those policies are not in place, the technologies are not going into the cars and the fuel economy isn't improving at all. And that's even though those countries are where, as I said earlier, most of the cars will be. So fuel economy policies are clearly vital. And that's why GFEI has built a network of 25 countries with whom we share best practice in terms of fuel economy policy and to whom we offer capacity building support. Again, countries like Mauritius, which working with GFEI recently developed and implemented a CO2 tax, which Hakim Steiner referred to just earlier, a tax which is based on consumers paying a charge if they buy a vehicle which emits over 158 grams of CO2 per kilogram, because that's the CO2 emission level of the average vehicle imported into Mauritius in 2010. But they get a rebate if the vehicle is below that level of CO2. And so this fee-bate, as it's known, ultimately will balance out, incentivizing the purchase of low CO2 vehicles. And we work on a regional basis as GFEI too. Earlier this year, we were very excited to host an event in Jamaica where we were able to promote fuel economy issues in the Caribbean. And that meeting concluded that the potential benefits of improved fuel economy for small island developing nations are so substantial that the issue should be included as an area of consideration for the SIDS specific platform on sustainable consumption and production, which was referred to earlier. And we're already beginning to do some very specific work in some of the nations that are within your grouping, countries like Jamaica and Barbados, and we would really, really like to do more with other SIDS nations. We'd be very happy to support you in your work on sustainable consumption and production. And now is the perfect time, we believe, to try and pursue the issue further through the Sustainable Energy for All accelerator process and through the development of the post-2015 SDG framework, where I know that as a grouping, SIDS are engaging too. We know that cost-effective technical solutions exist. We know policy makes a difference. We know too that industry will invest upwards of $400 trillion in fuels and vehicles before 2050. And that's a level of investment which, if we can harness it together with a political will to save the resources to which I referred, is going to make a vast difference to the vehicles that we drive in the future. And so we are very excited to be one of the energy efficiency accelerators which have been showcased here and which will ultimately be part of the Secretary-General's Climate Conference in September. We have begun to gather some additional support from countries and corporates at the meeting in Abu Dhabi, and then through the support of the French government at a meeting which will take place later this year in Paris. At that meeting, companies, corporates, countries, NGOs can meet with us, talk more about fuel economy, and hopefully decide to join the accelerator process. And we've been making the case for fuel economy as part of the SDG framework too. GFEI's objectives are very relevant. We believe they're also achievable, and of course they're also measurable, and they're all things that matter. And I think that's probably why Sustainable Energy for All and the high-level panel both identified an efficiency target as being an important part of the SDGs framework. We have to keep up the pressure, and we intend to do that, and we would very much like to engage, as I said earlier, with the SIDS nations in taking next steps in both of these policy processes, but most importantly of all, in developing fuel economy policy, which will enable SIDS nations to save resources, to save CO2, and ultimately as the places where much of the climate impact will be felt fiercest, to help save our planet. So if you'd like to know more about any of our work, please approach me afterwards. There are documents over on the side there, which will tell you more about some of this work. And thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to share my work with you.